Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year. We are continuing our New Year's Indie Book Blitz today with a whole new panel of portal/adventure fantasy authors here. We have Caroline on, we have Sky on, we have Deborah on, we have Autumn, who I believe will be joining us just shortly. So don't worry, we're going to bring Autumn on. Oh, I think we've almost got Autumn. So yeah, it's so good to have everybody here and on. If you're tuning in live, you can check out all of the authors' links and everything in the description box and drop questions for them in the bio. I'm so used to being on Instagram, you guys, in the comments, and I'll pull them over. But yeah, here's Autumn. Hey.
Hey, is this any better?
That's perfect. Yeah, we can hear you. All right. Great. So why don't we start? Caroline, why don't you kick us off? We're going to just go around, Caroline, Sky, Deborah, Autumn, and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about the books you write, whether they're portal or adventure fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Hi, well, I'm Caroline Noe. That's how you pronounce it. I'm in London, all the way from London here, and Happy New Year to everyone. Yeah, I've kind of written two sort of portal fantasies here. The first one was actually science fiction, where we had a time traveling portal. But the most recent ones are comedy. So I've been writing portal fantasy, I would say, except our portal isn't your average portal and doesn't play ball at all. So it's been really great fun to write comedy because you can take all the tropes of your normal portal adventure and turn them on their head or poke fun at them and really enjoy it. So I'm probably not going to be popular with the rest of our panel because I might take quite a few tropes and tip them about a little bit. It's based in a wolf fantasy, the most recent comedies. It's called The Mangy Wolf Saga, starting with a wolf so grim and mangy. And the second one being... Yeah, the second one being A Song of Mange and Poison. Oh, what I've done is that I've kind of put them in Mickey takes of various well-known tropes, if you like. But the first one would have been a satire on YA fantasy. The second one was house politics like Game of Thrones. And I've just today finished writing the very first draft of the third and final one. So well done to me. Yeah, it's a long old haul, isn't it, writing your first draft? And that one's going to be a Mickey take of Lord of the Rings. So we're gradually getting bigger. Yeah. Our portal isn't quite sure whether it's a vortex or a portal. It starts by coming through a magic book and a map drawing you to this location of said portal underneath a portaloo. So, yeah. I don't know if you want to hear any more, or should we move on to our other ladies there? And they're perhaps a bit more sensible portals, if you can have a sensible portal.
No. You know what I love about fantasy is that you can take it any way you like. And at the very beginning of the Blitz, we had Rachel Renner on, and Rachel was saying how really we're taking these tropes and breathing new life into them and making them unique and making them ours. So really, that's, I think, what a lot of us are doing.
We'll mention one thing, that my female main character is, like my good self, nearly 60 years old.
You don't look 60.
You don't look 60.
God bless you.
You don't.
I'm not aging badly, but the grey hair is all mine.
You look bloody 40.
Thank you. Bless you. I won't be buying your books.
And all the readers are like, no way.
You have to do the non-fiction one of what to do to stay this good looking. So
keep laughing.
I'm not laughing. And if you think that your portal ideas are crazy,
yeah, keep laughing to look young.
That's the secret to everything, isn't it?
Yeah. And we are definitely. While we're doing the introductions or overviews, we are definitely going to get deeper into everybody's book. So don't worry about that. We are going to get deeper. Sky, welcome back. I was so excited to see you on this one because you've been on the fairy tale retelling panels in the past. And I know that that's sort of what I had read of you. So tell us a little bit about the other aspects of your writing, the adventure and the portal.
Well, if Caroline said that, her ones are loopy and funny, then yeah, I don't think I can top the cake, but my portals are basically all the magic mirrors. So all of the Evil Queen magic mirrors, Alice to Wonderland magic mirrors, all those. And in terms of using those as portals, I just sat and thought, like, so how do people get from a place to a place? Obviously, you have to use something, right? And I came up just this year for a Genesis story for all of the mirrors, as in, how does one goddess create all of them out of what? And since mirrors being glass, and we have glass shoes and a couple of stories like The Wizard of Oz and Cinderella, then of course, out of the same material, you also create the magic shoes. So my portals are mirrors, but also I have the compact mirrors, because the goddesses can't find wall mirrors, the oval ones, everywhere they go. So they have compacts. So flip them open and just dive in, and boom, you're in another place. In terms of action adventure, mine are not very actiony. They are sarky. Some things do happen, and usually not what you would expect out of fairy tales. So kind of dark and sarky, that'd be me. And yes, I create a lot of different places that are interlinked, because yeah, why not? And yeah, my portals are kind of in between the spaces that I create. So quite a lot of my books are interlinked.
Yeah, Sky does a really good job of like giving you the parallels or like the twist on their head. And Caroline, when you said, twisting tropes, I was like, oh, Sky too. I know takes those tropes and like twists it around. So you fit right in on the panel.
Yeah, because it's fun. It's fun, flipping stuff on their head. It's fun.
Absolutely. Deborah, welcome back. I'm pretty sure that you joined our Spiffbo, which is a self-published fantasy blog off Blitz this summer. But honestly, it was such a whirlwind.
Oh, yeah.
I met like 80 authors for the first time over the course of 4 days.
Yeah.
And I was going, who have I met? Who have I not met? But welcome back. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I may have to mute occasionally. I have a dog who decided that she had to start barking right then, of course. So I was thinking different modes of portal, and certainly mirrors are fascinating. I go with gates. I tend to think of actual physical gates and or doorways. So I do that a lot with Kirilismus. The doors are portals, and gates are portals that are physical items that function as that way through. And there's different ones that show up throughout the first two books, where might have these brass doors that take you into kind of a side parallel universe that kind of is existing throughout the story, where magic is a little more prominent, or getting from our world into the realm of Kirilismus, which is the main land that they spend most of their time in. These ideas of doorways. So I always think of doors as being both magical, kind of bizarrely in between the world sort of places.
Yeah, giving some sort of Narnia vibes there with the doorways.
There's definitely a lot, and I know Narnia was a bit of the thing when I was growing up. That The Last Unicorn, some of the other really strong fantasy novels that were out at that time, were definitely things that were influences. But Kirilismus is its own universe. It's got its own magic system. There are talking animals, but there's other things going on as well, and dragons.
Yay! You got ahead, because we've had someone tuning in to almost every panel. It's actually more than one person, but they've been going, are there dragons in your books? It's like, raise your hand if you have dragons in your books. Everybody, a whole panel of dragon books. I love it. So glad to have you back on too. God. And Autumn, it's so good to meet you for the first time. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for having me. I'm a little nervous. This is my first time doing a panel, so
Yeah, I completely understand. My mentor, when I started doing these panels, this is the third year of the Blitz. And 3 years ago, my mentor was like, "You're the super shy, introverted author. You're going to start interviewing people on YouTube, and it'll make it easier for you to talk to people. And the more you do, the easier it'll get." And she lied. I love her to death. It helped a lot, but it did not help me. It helped a lot for me getting used to talking to people, but it didn't help the
right.
fear and anxiety. I've just learned to
Yes.
hide it better.
hmm
But so thank you for being brave and joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you write?
Well, I didn't intend to write a portal fantasy. I had seen a writing prompt and decided to write a short story from it. And that short story kind of grew over 6 months into an 8 book fantasy series. Um,
As you
so
do.
when I was trying to figure out how to go from Earth, where it starts like a contemporary romance on Earth before it gets to the fantasy part. And so trying to figure out how are they going to get to this other galaxy. And I'm a big Star Trek fan, big Trekkie. I love
Yay!
beam me down. So I thought, what if it's like a door, sort of like what Deb was saying, but mine is a door of light that you go into that takes you to the next realm. And then there's also like mini portals within the realm where the quadrants can send each other messages, where would normally take days or even a week to travel through this tube system, because it's like a mini portal. It's instantaneous that they receive the message at the other quadrant to communicate.
I love that. So it like brings the science fantasy into yours as well. So we've got
Yes,
some fairy tale, we've got the more fantasy style, we've got the door portals, we've got science fantasy. This is great. This is great.
exactly. Think like 15th, 16th century English castle, but with today's
Mhm.
modern technologies and
Absolutely.
comforts.
So yeah, one of the things that I wanted to ask this group specifically was, at what point in your minds does a book qualify to be a portal fantasy? Because as someone who's been in this community a long time, I've heard people say if it's not actual magical portals, it doesn't qualify. And I've also heard people say anything qualifies as long as they're going to another world through something, even if that's a teacup. So, where do you guys draw that line of, okay, I now consider this portal? And Autumn, I actually might let you start with this one just because you were mentioning how you didn't intend originally to write portal.
My husband and I were actually discussing this the other day, with knowing the panel was coming up. Like, would Harry Potter be qualified as portal because they go through the wall at platform 9 3/4 to get to, but at the same time, it's not necessarily to take them directly to the other realm. So that's where it would be like kind of iffy on that, versus Narnia, where you go through the wardrobe and automatically transported. So I'm sure there could be long debates about what exactly specifically makes a portal fantasy. Yes.
Yeah. But just for, for the sake of this panel, we'll just say for your own, I decided mine was portal when, like in
Um,
my case, in Velvet
I
Twisted Fate, I
probably
decided mine was a portal the moment she had to go through that plane of stars to get to the other dimension. I was like, this is going to be a portal. It might not be shiny and glowy, but it's portal.
I probably shouldn't admit this. I did not know mine was a portal fantasy until the book had been published. And one of my ARC readers said, "Oh, this was a unique take on portal fantasy." So then I'm Googling, what is portal fantasy?
That's awesome.
And that was when I learned that because of going through the magical door into this other realm, that's what qualified it, at least to this reader. And based on the description from what I could find of the genre, that's what made it a portal fantasy. So I did not even know that at the time.
Yeah. And that's a great point. When we're indie, because everybody on this panel is indie, and I know there's a lot of people watching on Twitter and on YouTube. So thank you all for tuning in. If you're thinking of getting into publishing, deciding what category might seem straightforward until you realize there's over 200 different subgenres you can put your books in, and it suddenly is not so straightforward.
Like, I knew it was epic fantasy. I knew it was romantic fantasy. I knew like the genre of fantasy itself, and then some of the subgenres, I just didn't realize it also qualified as a portal fantasy when I published. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How about you, Sky? When did you sort of make that decision? Because yours are also, like you said, fairy tale retellings, which is a whole separate subgenre.
Well, I started writing more about dimensions, but then I knew that they were kind of different from where Earth was. So it was a different place. How you get there, whether it's Beam Me Up Scotty or whether it is somebody tumbling through a wardrobe or a mirror, that just became the technical side of it. But I combine mine with also time travel, in the sense that, there are Greek myths where, and, even Bermuda Triangle, where people go and then they return and 100 years have passed. And in Narnia, it's different. It's you go somewhere and years pass and you come back and it's, you're still 8, 9, 10, 13, 15, or whatever they were, the kids, right? So it's kind of like for me, it's a portal fantasy when it's a different kind of world. And there are 2 of them at least. So, and it's different, but it doesn't have to be somebody falling through something or assuming the body of something, dying in one place and resurrected in another, because then it's just subtypes already. But for me, you don't even have to know how you get there, but you have to have a sense that this is a different there than where you were before. For me, that is portal.
Love that. How about you, Caroline?
That was quite difficult because my first book was actually sci-fi, and they were trying to create an experiment for a very good reason. And the portal was a complete accident. So in some respects, that's not portal fantasy until they got to the other realm, when it became fantasy. So we merged sci-fi into fantasy. That was the first. I actually have a friend, by the way, whose portal was a dustbin. You had to dive into the dustbin, which I always thought was immensely funny when I read it.
I love that.
You get, I mean, Narnia, if you look at it, Narnia never explains why that wardrobe's a portal.
Actually, I think it does.
At the end of Magician's Nephew, it's because it was made from the tree.
So I've missed that. But yes. But I mean, when she went through, she wouldn't have known she was going through. In the case of my comedies, she's following a treasure map. So we start with a completely different trope, which is magic book and treasure map. And the portal arrives as a result of storytelling. That's what opens the portal. So you have to, once upon a time, into your magic book, and the portal will open. So yeah, I agree that it's going. It's a doorway. Portal means a doorway.
Yeah, in your friend's case, into the garbage chute, Flyboy.
Into the garbage chute. Into my case, it kind of changes, and towards the end, we'll have a whole piece on whether this portal will or won't open, and why it will or won't open, and in which direction it will or won't open, and the difference between a vortex and a portal. That's a comedy or lie, but it is a door. I mean, after all, portal means that. And even IT uses the term portal. Right. Entering in to another dimension. I mean, we wonder why we use and why portals are so popular. I wonder it's because we are trying to escape a normal, usual, banal world into a fantastical, adventurous one. For me, that's generally where the portal is used.
Yeah. And
they're
Deborah,
all the other world, aren't they?
Oh, well, thank you. I was thinking about portals actually while you've been talking about things, and I think you're right. It can be kind of anything. It's weird too, because it can be another world, or it can be a different version of this world, depending on how you step. One of the reasons that I'm so fascinated with portal fantasy is I remember growing up And there was and I'm not overly religious, but I just love the idea of this. There was a wonderful version done in the 70s, I believe, of Godspell, and it was set in New York City. And the characters turn a corner and the real world kind of vanishes, or New York as we know it vanishes, and they're by themselves with just the characters there. And then at the end of the film, they turn a corner and the rest of the world comes back. So that idea of being able to step in and out of the place that is the world but isn't the world, and Stephen King's Langoliers almost does something like that too. But yeah, generally it is the concept of going from a world that we are knowing, that we are familiar with, into a different place that that is out of our norm, or is out of our relation to our world. So and we mentioned Narnia because that's definitely one of the most prominent of the portal fantasies, the most classic portal fantasy. And the whole series, they're in and out through different means. And it's not just a wardrobe, it's a painting in the Dawn Treader, and it's some other things throughout the rest of the series. So definitely getting from one place to another can be anything.
Yeah.
And that's actually where the adventure begins, because when you go into a different kind of place, which has, very different from where you came from, then immediately you have to start adapting to the place that you are, and your adventures begin. So that's why these two genres are probably very well put together.
Yeah. And that leads me to the second question I had. And then, as I said, if you're watching and you have questions, drop your questions in the comments and I'll pull them over after this one. But I think because Narnia is so prominent as like, here's what a portal is, there's this stereotype that portal fantasies might be for younger readers. And one of the things I loved prepping this panel was that there are books in this panel that are represented that are not for children. And so I'd just like to hear your take on elevating what a lot of different cultures might say, oh, that's a young adult trope or a children's trope, and made that an adult adventure.
Shall I start?
Whoever wants to start can jump in.
It happened for me because I do love fantasy, and I do love a certain amount of YA fantasy. I do. And as I was reading, it dawned on me that my age group was somewhat excluded unless you were the Wicked Witch. And I began to think, no, what about a fantasy for the disappointed and the menopausal and the and those with some spread and a bit of sciatica and all of which I do have before anybody goes at me. And that's when I decided, I was talking over with a friend and I decided, why not? Why not write a fantasy for an older woman, or about an older woman, and pitching an older woman with all of her, shall we say, learned experience into a fantasy setting, and have her react to the unfolding, changing world with all of that snark, like skies, in place. Such as insta love, you get slapped and told to, don't be so stupid. So that's why I did it, and elevating it in that way. Excuse me, it's not difficult if you're actually, to some extent, somewhat undermining the tropes, and if you are mining the tropes for comedy based on an older woman's perspective, then elevating to that age group is not difficult at all, especially if you're in that age group. I would have even read people writing my age group who were much younger than me, but there's very little of it about, actually. Very little. So that's why I did it. And I suppose it is Wizard of Oz and Doctor Strange. They're all using portals and they all kind of are somewhat younger, but this one, just because I'm undermining the tropes, is easier, shall we say, to elevate to a more adult standing than most, perhaps, portals.
Yeah. And I agree, Steve, that you see this increasing in adult, but I also feel like you see that more in indie beautifully than you maybe see in traditional. I love this genre. I love reading this genre, but it's nice to see it getting up into out of the 18-year-old, 19-year-old range a little. Not that there's anything wrong with the YA, but yeah. So how about the rest of you?
I
For
think.
me,
Oh, go ahead.
okay. No, Deborah, you go.
Oh, okay. I mean, for me, my character, I started writing it in my 20s and didn't really publish it until a couple of years ago. So my character really never got older with me. So she's 27, but she's still in that kind of age range where she's a little bit older. She's not 19. She's not, she's not 20. She's had some life experience at least, and has at least grown a little bit. And I think it is important. And, I've gone to have that older character, but keeping it from falling into YA is a trap. I know when I took the book originally over to our public library, and I teach in the town I live in, so I have a little bit of an in with knowing the librarians. They're like, oh, we'll put it in YA. And I'm like, well, it's not really geared for YA. It's not really meant for YA. I guess you could put it there if you want to, but it's not really meant for it. I have to kind of be careful how I write things, because my students know I write, and I have high schoolers. And so I have to be kind of cautious about letting them have access to it and making sure I don't write anything that's really going to trip me up. But I know for a fact my third book is definitely darker than the first two, and I'm working on that now. And I've had to work very carefully to keep it at the adult level, but not have it at too high a level. So it can't go into Anita Blake land, but it needs to stay at a level where it's not, oh, this is for kids. So it's I want to keep it elevated to that level and have those adult conversations, those adult interactions. The characters are definitely not teenagers. They have adult experience, but I don't want to get it to the graphic level. So it does kind of present a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can I just ask, do you think it presents a challenge for themes too?
A little bit, because certainly, the idea of one of the characters, the main character, does end up having a child with, her husband, and there is some challenge to theme with that, because you have to deal with the idea of sexuality leading to childbirth, leading to, okay, this is what happens in this community. And the third book is going to be touching on some different ideals, going into a little bit of polyamory, going into a little bit of LGBTQ. So it's going to be touching base on some things the first two books didn't. And so I'm trying to keep a balance with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'm greedy like Deborah, in sense of I write for people who kind of want to already know about the more darker themes and more adult themes, but it can be geared for YA. So ultimately, it's people who are more my age, more adults, who enjoy reading adult and new adult and young adult fantasy. And also it's aimed, some of the stories, which are about 18, 19-year-old characters or 17-year-old characters who some of the stories are aimed at YA, but with a view of they grow up, right? In a couple of years, they will be reading new adult stuff, or they might already be reading new adult stuff, or even adult stuff. So if they are of that mindset, then they can progress and they can continue reading some of the other stories that I write. But I found out a very interesting generalization in terms of a genre for this, which is mixed generation. And I don't think that Amazon KDP has a specific genre that you can pick, which is mixed gen, but it is, in fact, because some of the characters, they might be evil stepmothers who have gone to the Magic Kingdom because they've made a deal to raise Cinderella and get her married off. Then there's Cinderella, who's a stupid 17-year-old who is whingy and awful about all the things happening to her. But then there is a pregnancy trope, because of course there is. So there's darker themes for YA, but there's also stuff which is adult.
Mm.
But yeah, mixed generation for me.
Yeah.
Well, with me, there's no doubt that the entire courtship saga is completely adult. It deals with the protagonist and her childhood essay to her CPTSD and anxiety, and then of course going through the portal, and suddenly everybody's looking to her for the answers. There's war going on. There's bloodshed. Not Game of Thrones, not to that rate, but it's definitely 18 and older. There's not much sexual content in the first book, but as the series continues on and she's learning to trust herself and the love interest more, that does open up more, and it is open door scenes. But it has, like with your tropes you were talking about, like it has forbidden romance, it has chosen one, it has the popular tropes in it, but it is definitely geared at adults. My main character is 23 years old. She has graduated from college. She has a full-time job at the bank. When everything gets kind of turned upside down for her, and again having to now come to terms with this new realm that she's in, and all the changes suddenly thrust upon her and growing into her new role.
Yeah, I love how you guys pretty much sum it up. It comes down to not just the character age, because different character ages can still be written for younger audiences or older audiences, but it's also the themes, it's the struggles, it's what they're going through at that point in life. And Caroline, especially, I love how you filled the gap and wrote what you didn't see there. That's amazing. It's really inspiring. And somebody else in the chat was already like, I'm going to write one now.
Yes, I saw that. You go ahead. I think that it's just that I don't know what they think older women are, whether we just vanish off the earth or just stop being funny or stop being, full of life. And actually, as I've grown older, I've got more that way, not less that way. I think you care somewhat less about what people think as you grow a bit older. So I was trying to write that into, I was not trying to write myself. You don't really want to put yourself entirely into your books. But I was trying to write a character who has that experience and has the reactions of a woman of that age. So the themes also are the themes that would be prevalent for a woman of her age.
But if I may, sorry. That's why I love with Doctor Who that we start with Rose Tyler, who was young, but then with River Song, talking about, the women fantasy, that it wasn't just, let's just have these 22-year-old girls always in Doctor Who, that like River Song is my favorite character in the series, and I really love how they did her character with it. So
it's extremely poignant. That's why, isn't it? It's poignant because she's going backwards, isn't she?
Yeah. I think my first introduction to all of that was with Nicole Wells, and I'll pull this up. Nicole, love you. Nicole's not on the panels this year, but wrote Midlife Magic School. And I remember the first time I read it and seeing a brand new empty nester. And I was like, this is epic, because you think about how young, the older you get, like I'm in my 30s, you realize just how quickly time goes. And you're like, oh, well, when you're 15, you're like, oh, you're 30, you're so old. And then you turn 30 and you're like, oh, I don't really feel that old.
There's space for various generations in fantasy. It doesn't all have to be YA. You could have I would call them midlife, and then I've moved almost beyond midlife into a more, at 60, where are you on that list these days? So I just thought it would be fun. I just thought it's nice to have someone, and that's what people have said to me. It's nice to see someone I actually recognize in a fantasy.
And Sky, I saw your hand up too.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, since you began the question with in terms of, is it middle grade or YA or more adult, then I think what colors our experiences and is literally Alice in Wonderland and I don't know, Peter Pan, and those things, those stories that we are read to as kids or that we read as kids, Narnia.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. And then as a kid, it's almost, it's a fairy tale. And of course, when you go into a different world, then it's all different there. And you discover, and you have that awe for, and you have that curiosity. And then when life progresses, then you get into, I don't know, more vampires and more, I don't know, shifters and all of those things. That yes, there's fantasy, yes, there is magic, but it's more of a, I don't know, I guess that there isn't really a specific gradation of what we grow up with, in schools. Deborah, you're a teacher, right? To high schoolers. So I don't know that there isn't a portal fantasy thing that, this is what a portal fantasy you read as a kid. This is a portal fantasy that is happening when you are YA. And this is portal fantasy, which you get to when you're an adult. I read quite a lot of Russian portal fantasy, and there the trope is mostly somebody dies, usually a girl, usually under 25, finds herself in a different body in a princess competition, and, things happen. But that's the more adult version, and that's the more, the portal hop that is expected in that culture. But we don't get that through our education system. Correct me if I'm wrong, Deborah.
No.
We don't. So that's why there is a gap that Caroline is luckily filling, because we lose that awe, we lose that curiosity, we get more experience, we start believing less into magical things happening, which might account for the portal fantasy sticking to the kiddie zone and rather than the adult one. And then we have to get creative to get the adult ones going.
Well, if I can, I could answer that actually. We see a lot of that where the elementary school seems to have a lot of the portal fantasy or the regular, what we think of as fantasy. And for some reason, we're not sure. At the high school, we've talked about this a lot. For some reason, they go into dystopian fantasy or dystopian stories in middle school. And by the time they get to high school, they either are moved on to anime and that side and manga, or they just have absolutely no desire to read anything fantasy at all, and just want nothing to do with it. So it's interesting. I'm teaching sophomore honors students, and I've hit them with the Golden Compass and Book of the Dun Cow and Watership Down and some other things, and they're like, we don't know what to do with this. And it's like, okay, so we've had to deconstruct it to work through it, and it's been an interesting time reading their essays on these books.
But maybe dystopian because they are starting, as teens to think about the political systems, about how things are being governed. And dystopian is a really good, good versus evil and how to govern and not to govern things. Right. So that could explain, interest change and the loss of innocence of being just a kid and believing in Father Christmas and all that. So could explain.
Maybe the kids tell me they're burned out on dystopia by the time they get to high school.
Like, hello, here's all the magical and now here's how it all goes wrong. And then they're like,
and now go back to unicorns and different portals, please.
Oh, this has been a great discussion on that, and I'm so excited to hear the different representation in all of your books and the different spins on how this is relatable to all different ages. So if you're watching, you're like, I didn't even know this was a thing I needed in my life. All of these authors' links are in the description box, so you can follow them. You can check out their books. But before we hop off, this is the New Year's Blitz. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you guys have planned for writing, publishing, author events for 2024. What's coming your way? Autumn, you want to kick us off?
It's funny you should mention that. I'm currently working on a kind of secret, now not so secret project that is a portal fantasy involving a fae world, but it's from my fairy tale retelling. So it's within that world, but it's going to be a standalone. I also have the next 2 books of my courtship saga coming out. Book 4, Courting Hope, will come out in June, and book 5 of that will come out in December. I'm releasing each book 6 months apart until all 8 are out. And excuse me, I also expanded genres and wrote my first paranormal romance fairy tale retelling of Beauty and the Beast meets Dracula in Kingdom of Forgotten Curses that I just released this past October. And I just sent my Cinderella retelling, which is my next one, to my beta readers. One sat down and read the whole thing yesterday, and she absolutely loved it. So that was wonderful feedback. She answered the questionnaire very detailed. So I'm very excited about that. That one will come out in October. So that is the goal, is 3 books this year. I may attend an author event or 2. I'm still kind of looking at the calendar. With my anxiety, I really don't go out very much. Excuse me. Thank you, Steve. So I can't speak too much about author events, but I do have on TikTok, I am planning on hosting a few lives, and I will be hosting a few giveaways on there as well.
Wow, what a year planned. Whoa. And I feel you on the lives. I was talking to a friend and a relative recently. I was like, I might try to go to a local small thing just as, I don't know, maybe to attend, but I don't even know that I've attended that many as a participant, because I'm like,
right.
We got to work our way up a little bit. Caroline, what's coming in 2024 for you?
The end of the Mangy Wolf saga is coming, hopefully at the end of the summer, seeing as I've just finished the first draft. So there's quite a bit of drafting to go, as we all know, and edits. But that will finish off, coming full circle with a couple of new characters, a completely homicidal serpent, and a completely nuts mage cat. That's a couple of new characters coming in to finish off. So as I say, that will be Portal Fantasy coming all the way around back to where she began. So sequel drafting is its own special thing, I know. So yes, indeed it is. It's like bleeding from your fingers.
And so many
no, it'll be
details to
fine.
remember.
Actually, I don't know how most people feel, but I often find the first draft is more difficult. Yes, homicidal serpents rule, at least for now. But yeah, the other thing I'd like to start looking at, which I've been thinking of doing for a while, and some friends are trying to encourage me to do, is to perhaps start taking some community classes, maybe to start talking to people about story and doing these things themselves. So I would really enjoy to do that, I think. So that's my year.
That's awesome. And there's something, I don't know, really hard for me about writing the end of a series. I don't know if you're struggling with that.
Yes, I put up a notice about that. It's almost a sense of mourning.
Yes.
Because you're coming to the end, and people say, well, you could write more. I could write more, but I feel it's a natural end for a trilogy. There's a possibility I may go back and fill in some backstory with some shorter ones, because some of our characters have very, very colourful backstories. So that's a possibility. But in terms of the first person, present tense books I've been writing in comedy, I think that's coming to an end. And yes, there is a mourning, because you let's face it, we all fall in love with these characters, or we wouldn't write them. Exactly. You can't write something you don't love yourself, or at least you shouldn't. So yeah, it's hard to wave goodbye. Even writing comedy, as I say, I wrote the last page today, and I made myself laugh, so that's a good sign. But it was hard to write the end, maybe.
Oh, nothing like that. And then you're here on the live going, I'm fine, I'm happy, things are great. Yeah. How about you, Deborah? What's coming up in 2024?
So fortunately in 2 weeks I get done with the probably the most difficult semester I think I've ever had, where I haven't been able to write very much at all. I think I got 10 pages done in 4 months. So I'll be getting done with 2 college comp classes, an honors English class, and I had a college class too. Going into the second semester, it'll be easier. So my plan is to get through and finish the Ebon King. I'd like to get it done by summer. And get it ready for editing. And I'll be working with my editor over the course of the summer, if that goes well. And so that'll be the end of the Kirillithian trilogy, which again, it's going to be sad to let them go. I'm not sure if I'll be able to let them go fully or not, because they keep popping up in short stories that help fill in some holes that I've been trying to figure out. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know if I'm really ready for that, but we'll see how it goes. There's a possibility of a fourth book, but that's in the future. That's kind of later. And then I'll be working on the next book in my Shapeshifter series. So I have one out now, Wolves Running, and it's urban fantasy shapeshifter and set in Colorado, which I'd never been to until this past June to actually go to the places I wrote about. Figure that worked out. I had to go see what I was writing about after I wrote about it. So the next one will be set in New England, where I won't have to go that far, which is good. And that's what the working title right now is, Fox and Jay Incorporated. So I'll be looking forward to pulling that together. And it's going to be kind of a detective story, but a little bit of magic, a little bit of shapeshifters. It'll be kind of an interesting one, what I've got planned. So I'm looking forward to it. Some local color we'll be putting into the story. So it'll be neat.
Yeah, awesome. I love that title, Steve says. Yeah. So many great titles. Yeah, Sky, what a whirlwind few years you've had. You've been on almost all of the blitzes, I think. And it's always exciting to see what else you're coming up with.
Yeah, certifiable, I think. That's what's coming up this year. But I have one book, Caroline, stop laughing. I have one book this year actually coming out. Don't laugh. One, yes. Fire and Ice, The Goddess of Frost, which is book number 4 in my Goddesses series, which are all standalones. And they all have separate plot lines, but there's a one line going through all of them as well. Except one of my villains is wanting a book of her own because she wasn't happy with the one that I wrote. It didn't devilify her. So in terms of loving our characters, quite a lot of my readers have hated that character from my Cinderella story, the godmother, who is an awful biatch. But people have hated her, and one of my co-authors from the sets that anthologies that I've written has dared me to devilify her and write her a backstory so that people would understand a morally black, not morally gray, a morally black character and make her likable. So I have that task, and that's at the back of my mind, and that's why Melly, that's the character, she's wanting her own book, which will be a Wonderland meets Oz kind of thing. So that will probably get written or started this year as well. And in addition to that, I have 4 sets, as in 2 different anthologies and 2 different sets of my own short stories. For the first anthology that we have coming up in April, it's called Third Name's a Charm. And it's in support of literacy. 20 plus authors have come together to write shorts for a specific theme. So Third Name's a Charm's around trios and triple threats. So that should be fun. I've read all of the beta stories and they're like chef's kiss, basically. So I love all of them. And the next anthology will be May. My crazy, yeah. And that will be less stories, 10 stories. And it's, again, for a charity in help of, I think this one will be in help of communities touched by tornadoes and stuff, because the last one, Enchanted Flames, was to help communities touched by wildfires. So Enchanted Skies will be something to do with air. So probably tornado relief fund or something like that. And the 2 sets that I have of my own short stories will be Tales of the Shoes and Tales of the Dragons. Love a villain book. Yeah, me too. I just need to write it.
Yes.
But Tales of the Shoes, there will be a short story about the godmother stealing Cinderella's shoes and Cinderella's younger sister stealing them back. Tales of the Dragons, there will probably be a composite of the short stories that I have had in previous anthologies, just put together into one, and maybe adding a story that I haven't written before. So that's my year, kind of, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing and for hopping on to start the new year with us. This has been a blast.
Thank you for inviting and having us.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And thank you, everybody who tuned in. If you've been watching this as a replay and you're like, no, I wanted to ask a question, leave your questions in the comments. I will get them to the authors and I will try to get answers for you. We have more Blitz panels because we had to move the Sunday panels to this week from last week. So there are 2 more today, and then there are panels planned for tomorrow as well for the Blitz. So stay tuned. I think we've got 7 in total this weekend. So you can subscribe to meet all the new indies. Thank you all so much. Have a happy new year.
You too. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you for having
everybody.
us.
Bye.